Grateful always to offer greetings to those of you who tune in via the YouTube, and another good morning to those of you who are here with me on this beautiful day. And hello to anybody who might be around campus watching on our closed circuit live stream. Miss you, but I'm happy to have you participate in that way. This happens to be a Sunday on which my set of chapel themes restarts, and the very first of the 19 themes that I cycle through, it's a random number, but is associated with a single word, healing. And I say this because as I was building the series of topics for chapel, the one I put first was the one that I heard delivered at chapel pretty much week after week in the years in which I was here, and the chapel service was presided over by its founding clergy person, Father Bill Holberg, who most of you would not know, but his portrait is on the wall there. Father Bill was a great guy, and he thought it was essential. Almost every Sunday, he would at some point work in a short phrase, because what he wanted to do was make sure that people who were here heard his deep conviction, and one that can be supported, that addiction was best thought of as sickness, not sin. And following, if sickness, not sin, then the solution being healing, not repentance. And that's my sort of short additional tack on, is the healing, not repentance. So that's the direction we're heading, is healing rather than repentance. And both are agendas of spiritual communities. Healing and repentance are both spiritual community agendas. But the way they are addressed are quite different. So you have confessional and, it's funny, penitentiary, like with prison. There are penance, rites, and rituals in various religious communities for people who are disobedient, bad boy, bad girl kind of persons in the life of a religious community. And a ton of shame that is associated with that. The Scarlet Letter, if any of you, if we still make people read that or whatever, like the stockade in the Puritan communities, the way that moral disobedience was sought to be corrected in religious communities over the course of history has been pretty harsh and really unpleasant, and there's still a legacy about that. So I still hear people saying, "When do you get released from Caron?" And I have family members who tell me that my loved one called and said they're being forced into this horrible thing. The food is awful, and it's just and they insist that I come and spring them. And by the way, don't get baited with that, because it's all a rather self-evident manipulation. So, sorry, patience. So, sickness, not sin, healing versus repentance. In the years in which I've addressed this topic, today, as I've reflected on it again this week, I was moved to want to spend the time I get to spend with you to talk about forms of sickness and forms of healing. Because there are different varieties of ways we get sick. An example I was thinking of is you can go to see a urological oncologist, very highly specialized form of medicine. And I wouldn't go to a urological oncologist to talk about what would be best for a neurosurgeon to weigh in on, right? Because you go to one specialist for the other. I wouldn't go to the neurosurgeon to talk about bladder cancer. It happens I've spoken to both of these kinds of professionals, and I can tell you I would never ask my neurosurgeon about my bladder cancer condition. And this is what's happened, is that medicine has become highly specialized without doing overly too much history lesson. And one of the things I want to do is I want to reflect way back in history and to think about how the phenomenon of addiction would have been viewed previous to the period of specialization and Industrial Revolution and Enlightenment and rationalism and all of that stuff. So it's out of the 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries, this 400 or 500 year period in which the printing press is a key event that sort of sparks the change in how specialization emerges on the landscape of our lives. But if you were to get to have a chat with Jesus in history, or peers of Jesus who were being seen as healers, I'm pretty sure that those of you who wear the wristband here would have been viewed as people who were suffering from a demonic illness. And you might be surprised that I would say that. I'm sure it's not necessarily at first blush obvious, but to me it's very obvious, especially as a person who is now in long-term recovery. Because I remember of many evenings, evening after evening, when I knew I should stop, I knew I shouldn't enact these ridiculous behaviors of going to the ATM and going to the drug dealer and partying into the night, and then waking up sick the next morning and then doing it all over again. But where I observed myself enacting these actions, and some part of me was like, don't do it, and I could not inhibit the behavior. And so this is almost what sort of, for me, seals the deal on sickness, not sin, is that if it was a moral issue, I should be able to morally change my resolve, but because no matter how much resolve I had, I couldn't stop on my own. I'm into the understanding. And in antiquity, science, spirituality, medicine were not really separate disciplines. The person was viewed as a whole, and if you were the victim, let's say, of a hostile takeover, we have texts in the Hebrew and Hebrew and Christian scriptures which talk about exorcism and show that the methods of healing, which I'm not planning a public exorcism at the moment, but the hope was that there would be methods to evict the hostile takeover and release the captive back into healthy and productive functioning in a social society. Then we get to specialization, and I know I'm playing hopscotch over history and science, and I'm going to make tons of broad generalizations, which I realize can be really risky, but I'm trying to be mindful also of a limited amount of time. So, where antiquity would have looked at this as a spiritual illness, contemporary and especially early 20th century medical perspectives wanted to attack the phenomenon of addiction through the microscope, and there's a term that I'm missing, but like an algorithm, like a decision matrix. So if a person is defined to have addiction, then take these steps. And that's how most of you are treated by most physicians for cancers, for differential diagnosis is the particular kind of term. Narrow down to what is the diagnosis and then what are the prescribed treatments. And that's what's been sought for a long time for addiction, is a sort of medical model of address. And there's been some significant progress and some interesting tools in the toolkit on the medical side. And along with the medical side, when I say medical today, I'm kind of meaning the physiological body, but which manifests DTs, delirium tremens, and cravings, and cirrhotic livers, and all kinds of things. So addiction sickens the body. But it also is this bizarre mental phenomenon. And in that same period of time in history when specialized medicine emerges, one of the things that also happens is what was first called talk therapy, that's not the right word, but spoken medicine. It was innovated by Sigmund Freud and then Carl Jung. And today is what we think of as psychotherapy. And today, psychotherapy is much more mechanical than it was with Freud and Jung, which was quite artsy. But today you have these things, most of the patients have heard about CBT, DBT, EMDR, ACT, all these acronyms that are manualized methods of tinkering with the mind when the mind is viewed to be sick. And so I'm hoping that you're following me here. So the thoughts are, I wonder if there's a medicine that will fix me, meaning a pharmacological body modifying thing, and I wonder if there's a therapy that will fix me because I'm sick and I need to be fixed. That's the sickness mind that we tend to adopt. That's how I felt when I had my cancer or my brain tumor, like, fix it. And there are solutions for addiction care involving these two notions. There are medicines that help people begin to recover. There's AND abuse, which fences people away from alcohol, and there's really interesting medicine, Vivitrol, which prevents the opioid-dependent person from getting high on opioids. And but it's a little bit like the Tylenol that you take for a headache. It's a symptomatic address without asking why you have a headache in the first place. And that's one of the challenges, is are we treating a symptom or an underlying cause? When you get into the talk therapy, I think you're getting more into the nature of the etiology, that's the fancy word, for the genesis of the condition. And many people, even 20, 30 years ago, thought this was the frontier that needed to be the pencil sharpened, but was going to be the channel for the answer for addictive disorders, was just better therapy. You just need to find the right therapy. The newest sort of bright bulb on that horizon is a thing called ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy. And it's great, and it helps people with addictive disorders, and CBT is really helpful, those kind of things. But there's an article that I came across. I had intention of looking up the author of the article, so I apologize to the article's author for not knowing his or her name, but it's an article in the nursing journal about how you train psychiatric nurses so that the psychiatric nurse will be informed about patient choices in regards to addiction. Because a lot of people, even if you're schizophrenic, delusional, acute bipolar episode, suicidality, that's the kind of things we'll get in the psychiatric hospitalization. A lot of those people are also addicted. And sometimes there's a strong correlation. So you can reduce the addictive problem, the psychological, other manifestations get way better. But so anyway, this article was training a psychiatric nursing level provider to help the patient know what they should be listening to their doctor for. The analogy here would be, if you are a cancer patient, we all kind of know this, we listen for surgery, chemo, and radiation, right? You want to know, if I have a cancer, first of all, can you cut it out? That would be like awesome. Secondly, if you cut it out, and do I need chemo or do I need radiation? So we all sort of know the algorithms about that and the way those three things structure. If surgery is doable without horrible hurt, it sort of takes the first agenda. And then, if I can just do the surgery alone, yay, and do I need chemo or do I need radiation? Do I need both chemo and radiation? That's kind of how cancer care today evolves. And now there are new things. There are these genetic, variations and all that stuff. But the reason I say that is this nursing article educates the psychiatric nurse to believe that there are, again, three modalities that help people with addiction. And they are pharmacological, so this is medicines, professional therapeutic, this is clinical therapists, and mutual support. This would be like the AA, Narcotics Anonymous, Smart Recovery, Recovery Dharma, these peer recovery movements that are non-scientific, and many people have looked at a little bit askance, wondering how necessary they may or may not be. And in this particular article, which predates some important research, that question was not really decided. But the article said, if you're a psychiatric nurse, you might want to make sure that your patient is aware that they could access any one of those three modalities. They might benefit from medication, they might benefit from professional therapy, and they might benefit from mutual support. Well, after that article was published, in the last couple of years, there was a really important definitive study seeking to be definitive, and I think it sort of really answers what's been a persisting question in this world. I'm lecturing a lot, but I'll get to the spiritual side of this in a minute. The findings in 2020 were that mutual support is the thing that wins the race against a priority. Mutual support is like surgery. If you can do it, you need it. And you may or may not need medication, or you may or may not need professional therapy. But if you don't access mutual support, your outcomes, the biggest outcome is return to treatment. So the thing that you want to not have to do, you want people to have to come here, okay, but you want them not have to come back again and again and again. That's what insurance companies want, and that's what we'll want to measure. It's not, well, a person never drink again. You can never measure that because you don't know in the future whether their illness will recur. But does the recurrence happen with sufficient gravitas that it requires additional treatment is what insurance companies measure. And it turns out that you have more returns to treatment if you disregard mutual support. and actually mutual support outpaces therapy. And the medicine helps either of them, but medicine alone is not a solution either. So like antabuse, for example, or MAT or those sorts of things without therapy. And MAT, it stands for medication-assisted treatment. And the A is really important, it's the assisted part. If you're just doing the medication, you're not getting therapy, or you're not doing mutual support, you're not doing MAT, you're just doing MT. So, I have a place I really want to get to. Caron is known for certain phrases. Not only the sickness, not sin that my dear departed friend had, and he was a jukebox of brilliant phrases. But there are two things that Caron is known for that are predate Father Bill and are instructive here. One is this place is called Magic Mountain. And the other is out there, if you walk along the way, that's called Flannery Way. And there was a guy named John Flannery who had been incarcerated from the government had tried to punish him out of addiction, thinking it was a moral failing. And then he had come to chit-chat and gotten well, and then became an employee here. And without any clinical credentials, he helped tons and tons of people. That was in the time when we could hire people who didn't have master's degrees. And Flannery was known for this one saying, which probably many of you who are patients today have heard already: "We will love you until you can love yourself." And where I said, when I said I wanted to go somewhere, was back to the antiquity, to the spiritual solution. And that medicine and mental therapies have their place, but they have their limits. And when the research shows that people need to still go to AA or Dharma or SMART, it's because a social and spiritual solution is the thing you cannot take away. And there's all this new research with psychedelics, very interesting. Someday I'll do a talk on them, but quite controversial. But the two things I think are so interesting about the psychedelic is, one, that there are current researchers who say there's nothing that happens in the psychedelic therapies that aren't insights that people could have without psychedelics. It's just often hard. There are barriers for people to have. It's insight-oriented. And secondly, this is a Jack statement that may or may not yet be proven, but I believe will be borne out, is that if you do psychedelic therapy for depression, anxiety, addiction, or whatever, and you don't follow it up with change and belonging, my prediction is that recurrence rates will be significant, even if longer delayed. Because you have to support the long-term change of life with love. This is the healing power that is underregarded but most important. And as soon as you hear it and you look back at the history, you realize it has always been present in the successful solution set. And it has been present in antiquity, it's been present in early AA, and it's been present as the highly technical and manualized models started to move towards what they called attachment therapy and attachment theory. And when I say spiritual, I mean not just believe in God. That's a great part of spiritual if you have it, but it's belonging, meaning, and purpose. And what happens is that people who are addicted have an erosion, corruption, and deconstruction of belonging, meaning, and purpose. They become less connected, their lives lose relevance, and the sense of call and purpose is driven to just get the next drug. And they will forsake their children, they will lose their careers, or privilege they're using over their careers. They will and the people who love them will be like, what happened? Where are you going? When they just recede into this bubble with this hostile takeover. So the neuroscientists help us here too, because they do say this is a hijacked brain, which is fascinating. They can show in the brain scans that there is a loss of the capacity of reason to function in an addicted brain, and in a recovering brain, you start seeing the reason centers begin to activate. But how do you get it done is through connectedness, it's through belonging, it's through meaning, it's through love, it's through socialization. It's the social and spiritual, along with the medical and mental, that will be what you want to know is what you're getting in care. Is this an approach that is grounded in love? Is this an approach that will help me heal my relationships? Is this an approach that will reconnect me in a meaningful way in the world? And that's what Caron is above all known for. And it's emphasis and insistence with insurance companies that we have to have these 28-day lengths of stay so that we can do family work. It's insistence on having a thing like the Chapel Fund that will help people stay in elongated care. It's commitment to a notion of recovery is recovery for life. That 28 days is a beginning. And this is not jail. You have just been freed. You are here to help reintroduce you to a society that you've been captive of for too long. And that shift is a really important one that I don't know if I've ever articulated in that way, but I think it's an insight that hit me this morning on my drive up. This is not captivity. This is rehabilitation into social life that the addicted person has been diminished in their capacity to function and be present in. So, this is a place of healing. Let us do everything that we can to set aside the shame, the blame, the penitential, the punitive, the finger pointing of which we've been, sold by a society that is stuck in an outdated and ineffective understanding of the phenomenon that brings us to this place. And let's also do better than just a mechanical, medical, tinkering model and realize that what we're trying to repair is a hijacked heart. There is a person that's been lost here, a bunch of them. If I had the wristband, people raise their hands. Every one of them is a lost soul. And our job here as a community together and those persons that participate is to retrieve, soul retrieval, bring people back into our connectedness in our lives. And the most powerful way to do that is not this, but love. That's the message for today. Thanks.